as there are rabbinic Jews. So. So, shout out to your boy there.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Dyer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for hosting the space today. I wanted to come in, represent the Catholic position.
Okay.
So I guess first off, I want to hear what is the defense of the Council of Florence, and how do you, from the Orthodox side of things, determine if an ecumenical council is authoritative or not?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty well known if you read the Ostromov book on Florence that the fact that we had a handful of patriarchs and bishops there that did accept it certainly doesn't mean that the entire Orthodox Church accepts it. St. Mark of Ephesus famously didn't accept it. And the Orthodox world unanimously rejected the bishops that did accept Florence. So for us, there's no one-size-fits-all easy answer any more than for you. There's a one-size-fits-all easy answer because Roman Catholics, even with the doctrine of the papacy, still don't have a very clear list or idea of what the ecumenical councils are namely the inconsistency that you have with, for example, Lateran 649.
Clue me in on Lateran 649 and what nuance there you're specifically referring to.
So at the time of the dispute over the monothelite controversy, Rome called a council which intended to be a independent from the emperor council. So the Pope of Rome called a council. Maximus went. I've been to the Lateran a few months ago where this council was had, and they condemned monothelitism. And that's a great thing, and we're happy for that. But that council meets all of the Roman Catholic later criteria for what should count as an ecumenical council. However, when the Sixth Ecumenical Council met, they did not simply state, oh, well, we already have the convenient definition from Lateran 649 from the Pope and Pope Martin, so we don't even have to have an ecumenical council. If they had the Vatican I mindset, they would have simply said, Lateran 649 has already solved the issue. But in fact, what they do is they investigate the teachings of the monothelites, the monothelite patriarch. They investigate the teachings of the Pope of Rome and previous theologians and St. Maximus. And it is not the papacy that is the chief arguer of that council. It is St. Maximus who is the chief theologian of the Sixth Ecumenical Council. So the Sixth Ecumenical Council's lack of citing Lateran 649 as a papal decision itself proves that Roman Catholics don't have a clear, coherent, but rather an evolving idea of what counts as ecumenical councils. And plus, the Fifth Ecumenical Council, the emperor basically made the Pope submit to it. So once again, you have many examples of this kind of thing, which shows that you guys don't have it either. And by the way, Vatican II is hotly disputed and very ambiguous when it comes to more and more Roman Catholics themselves now telling me, thank you, that they don't believe in Vatican II. So what's your epistemic criteria for a universal ecumenical council?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, as I would traditionally say, as a standard is, what the Pope says is what goes.
Okay, then why wasn't Lateran 649? And Lateran 649 is still not listed by your church as an ecumenical council. Why not?
I wouldn't know. I'd have to look into that specifically. So that's definitely a good insight I should look into.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of famous examples like this, so it's not like this is the only one. I mean, there's a whole case of Pope Vigilius. You could watch the debate between Ubi and John? I can't remember if it's John Colarafi or who's the other uniate, the old hiccup guy that wouldn't debate me because he has hiccups. The uniate Roman Catholic apologist, the boomer guy, I forget his name, but he and Ubi have a debate over the Fifth Council and Pope Vigilius, and you can see that he didn't fare very well in that debate with Ubi either.
Gotcha. Okay, well noted. I'll definitely check those out. I guess so. If to simplify, then we don't, on the Orthodox side of things, getting back to my original question, we don't really have like a finite point where the buck stops when it comes to authoritatively understanding, what makes the Ecumenical Council authoritative. I guess what I heard from you was,
Well,
Florence
so
was
now you're
ultimately-
equivocating, because authoritatively pronouncing a council is different from understanding the council. So if you're talking about normative authority, that's a different question from an individual having certitude about what's true or false, or what councils are true or false. So those are two different, they're related, but they're two different questions. So for example, we might agree, you and I as Orthodox and Catholic, against a Protestant, for example, that the church in history has normative authority. That means that you and I both agree that there is a historic body of people post-apostles who have the ability to make decisions that bind the consciences of believers to some proposition. So we agree there against Protestants, right? And that would be called normative authority. However, there's a separate topic in epistemology which relates to individual certitude, and that's where me, you, and Protestants all disagree, because we have different accounts of how that comes about. We all agree that in the final analysis, me, you, and the Protestants, we all agree that ultimately it's the Holy Spirit that grants and convinces the individual of certitude. But how that comes about, we differ. So for the Roman Catholic, it comes about ultimately through papal fiat and decision. For the Orthodox, it comes about through a combination of means. That would be the liturgy, the lives of the saints, the life of the church. It would be the church fathers, the councils, the scriptures. For us, all of those things work together. So there's no one element that we say, oh, this is the thing that is like the ultimate thing. So we think all of those things go together, because divine revelation and the one true faith is really expressed unanimously in all of those areas. So there's not, it really makes no sense to pick one of them out as like the thing, right? Because, for example, for us, an ecumenical council is not some like magical thing that just had one easy way to identify. Ecumenical councils were part and parcel of the oikumene, or the empire. So when there's no longer an empire, it really doesn't make sense to say that there's an oikumene council anymore. But there are, you could say, pan-Orthodox synods. You could say that for us, the Palamite synods have the same status and authority, because they've been received basically through the entire Orthodox world by all the patriarchates, etc. So a lot of those kinds of, we think there's a multiple tiered thing that you could look at. For example, the councils refer to previous councils. The councils are in some way referential to the patriarchates, and all the patriarchates accepting it, and the rest of the church. And also you have the idea of the theology itself actually being true. So, we have the Robber Council of Ephesus. Well, so do we only know what's the true faith until when the Pope says, oh, the Robber Council is false? Or could we identify the Robber Council as false prior to it? Well, I can prove this to you easily, because do you think that a Christian in the year 300 had access to what the true faith was if he didn't live in Rome?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well, how would a Christian in 300 in, say, Ephesus know what the true faith was?
Well, I don't know if I would go so far to say he would completely understand 100% of the nuance of his faith, but would he have...
No, just knowing the true faith, right? So let's say I walk into Ephesus, it's the year 300. There's a bunch of different sects, like Irenaeus lists all the different Gnostics. Everybody's claiming to be the one true followers of Jesus. There is the Orthodox Catholic Church, and then there's other groups and splits and whatever's out there. How do I, as a year 300 person, come to know what the true faith is? Because I don't know what's going on in Rome. It's the ancient world. I can't send scroll emails to Rome to get Pope whoever to answer me really quick to tell me what the truth is. There's no ecumenical council yet, right? We've had, 200 plus years of Christianity, no ecumenical council. How do I know what the true faith is? If I'm a Vatican I papist, I can't know. I don't know. I have to, literally everybody have to go to Rome or write letters to Rome to know what the true faith was. You see how silly this position leads? What it leads to?
I mean, yeah, I get what you're getting at. I mean, back then, I think how you would know if you were in a true church or not, like Irenaeus or Ignatius imply, would be, if your church is connected to a bishop that has apostolic succession.
Okay, but there's plenty of sects and there's plenty of heretics and schismatics like the Novatianists at that time that had apostolic succession.
Right, but that's exactly why we begin to have councils. I mean, dogmas only seem to rise when there's dispute, when there's confusion, right?
Okay, but you said earlier that knowing related to ecumenical councils. But now, in the year 300, knowing the faith doesn't relate to an ecumenical council.
Well, correct, because the church is organic, right? And like I just said, dogmas rise with disputation. Obviously, Justin Martyr.
So ecumenical council. So knowing the faith is not then tied to having an ecumenical council.
Well, it's all about context. It's about the life of the church. The church isn't some like.
How does that answer How does that answer the objection?
Restate the objection real quick, if you wouldn't mind.
So this contradicts what you said a minute ago, that ecumenical councils tell us and give us knowledge of the faith. You said infallibly knowing. I forget what phrase you used, something like that. So which is it? Is it that the councils give us the certitude and knowledge of the faith, or they don't?
For sure they do. Yeah.
Okay, so how would I know in the year 300 what the true faith was? There's no council. I mean, there's local councils.
We had the Council of Jerusalem. The Book of Acts. So again, I would say like here in
yeah, but that's in Scripture. But you're a Roman Catholic, and you're talking about so now you're a Protestant in the year 300. I go to Scripture to figure out what the true councils are.
Well, I think it would be a Protestant response to say we knew Florence was wrong because all the laymen disagreed. So
did I say that? I said the rest of the Orthodox world, including the rest of the bishops in the Orthodox world. I didn't say all the laymen disagree.
Sorry, that's what I heard. I heard the Orthodox people disagree, and that's why. And with
Florence, the Orthodox people is made up of bishops and laity. So you
right, but the highest degrees of the bishoprics of the Orthodox world, along with
you don't even understand. There's not so Mark of Ephesus, right, did not go along with it, and there's no like. It's not like you're not listening. So you don't understand our position. The bishops are all equal. They have canonical privileges. There's no super bishops in the Orthodox Church.
Okay, so that means there's no higher authority.
Correct.
Within every bishop is the same, and that's
correct.
Right. So where does the buck stop with authority? That seems to be
you understand that, but that's not a problem. That's a problem everybody has. That's my point. And I illustrated this with how do I know the true faith in the year 300?
Is that a problem everybody has?
How do I know the true faith in the year 300? Can you answer this or not?
I feel like I have.
What was the answer? I didn't hear an answer. I heard a bunch of talking around it. What's the answer?
All right, let me answer. Let me answer, and I'll tell you when I've answered, and then please respond.
Well, isn't this going to be the answer? Why would you have to tell me when you answered?
I just want to get the full thought out there. And I'm not as given to debate or as gifted as debate with you. So it takes me a little longer to get my articulation across. Okay. So I guess my answer to that would be is fundamentally I see the church as something organic, as something alive.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Amazing. A very simple example, and I'll come around to the full point here. Very simple example, Justin Martyr, obviously saint, obviously knew the true faith. Was he completely, as perfectly nuanced as we would like to see in the year 2024 when it comes to Christology and Trinitarian theology? No, right? But as the years went by, we had disputations about the Trinity. Therefore, ergo, what ended up happening is we had a council to begin to solve these things. And that's when you saw this pattern happen.
But I agree with that pattern totally. Yeah, but that doesn't. How does that answer the question of the year 300 knowing what the true faith is?
Well, simply because the true faith continuously extrapolates and becomes clear as disputation arises. So.
Okay, so we don't know the Trinity until people disagree with it. That's a terrible argument.
I wouldn't say the average layman would have as nuanced and as clear of an understanding of the theology pre-Cappadocian fathers or anything like that. Yeah, absolutely not. But did they not have a saving faith that they weren't?
Yeah, but none of this addresses the objection that knowing and asking what the Christian faith is in the year 300 without access to Rome and without any ecumenical councils disproves your later argument that we need the papacy to know the faith.
Well, I feel like that would be getting into another conversation.
No, it's not. It's a perfect way to illustrate the fallacy that you're relying on. Let me give you another example of this same position. At the time of Constantinople I, you mentioned the Cappadocians, and Constantinople I is the Second Ecumenical Council, which gives the church the doctrine of the Trinity. At the time of the council being held and at its close, St. Meletius of Antioch was outside of communion with Rome. So he died in schism. The council of the Trinity was had outside of communion with Rome. And yet, the council was still true. It correctly taught the doctrine of the Trinity that the church accepted. And a couple hundred years later, Rome retroactively accepts that council. So, how does your position reconcile with that fact?
Well, simply because, Rome still ended up accepting that, obviously.
Okay,
and
did the council, you don't even
I
understand the objection. Did the council correctly teach the Trinity outside of Rome?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, and your church accepts St. Meletius as a saint, even though he died out of communion with Rome.
Correct, yep.
Yeah, which is inconsistent because Unum Sanctum and Florence Cantate Domino, which you just referenced, Florence, says that anyone who dies outside of communion with the Roman bishop is damned. So heretics and schismatics do a council that correctly teaches the doctrine of the Trinity. And so, therefore, that alone, if you admit that it correctly that proves that we don't need the papacy to know the true doctrine of the Trinity.
Well, the thing is that we still do. I mean, does the
did you not hear what I just said? You don't understand.
No. I totally.
Can you restate to me what the argument is before you move on?
Sure. Okay. The argument is, and I'll put it very simply. You have these councils that correctly defined theology, such as the Trinity, such as the St. Meletius, who in fact was in excommunication from Rome and died so. Yet, despite Rome not acknowledging said council or said saint during the lifetime of these events, they accepted them retroactively.
Did the council correctly teach about the Trinity?
Correct, yes.
And that was had outside of Rome, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, do we need Rome to know true theology?
Yes.
Okay, you just contradicted yourself because you just admitted that they were outside of communion with Rome. They correctly taught and knew the Trinity, and now you're saying that no. So that's a contradiction.
But here's the difference in the perspective, Jay. And feel free to critique this as well if you find this erroneous. Yes, did the human who occupied the office of the papacy and the magisterium itself not recognize the truth as it was right under their noses right then and there? Yes, for sure.
No. That has nothing to do. It's not about the Pope. It's about the people at Constantinople I. Did they know and recognize the true faith and the true doctrine of the Trinity outside of anything to do with the Bishop of Rome? Have you read Basil's letters, how he bitches about Rome being useless and worthless at that time? So, I'm serious.
What letter is this?
I have a whole lecture on all of Basil's letters, and I give the lecture. I give the letter in that lecture. I can pull it out if you really want me to. But the point is that
I just love to know what it is to research it if you can.
I will give it to you, yes, since you asked. But the point is that
thank you.
The point is that the people at the council and the Cappadocians and Meletius correctly knew and stated and defined with nothing to do with Rome. That proves that we don't need the Bishop of Rome to know the true faith. And that disproves all of what you're arguing.
And Rome acknowledges that by retroact. Basically, what Jay's argument is, Rome retrospectively acknowledges you don't need Rome by accepting Constantinople I. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Right, I understand the position, for sure. But I guess what I would say is that the office itself did recognize that as the truth, and it was that office.
That's irrelevant to what the point is. You just admitted that it doesn't matter that it recognized it 200 years later, because the people at that time didn't need Rome. That's the point. You don't see this? This is obvious.
Those people did not need Rome. But that truth needed Rome to be its preserver and its guarantor throughout the ages.
No, it didn't. That's in fact, Pope Benedict says that the Orthodox Church has maintained the Christian faith for the last 1,000 years. So, yeah, thank you. Exactly. Therefore, we don't need Rome to have the faith. So, this is Basil's letter 80. Starts on, let's see, 66 to Athanasius of Alexandria. That's where he starts complaining about Rome. And it goes all the way up to letter 69. 70 to 70.
What was the title of that letter again?
Letter 66 to Athanasius of Alexandria. And it continues all the way to letter 70. So look at Basil's letters, and you'll notice that everything St. Basil says about Rome is absolutely preposterous when viewed in light of what Vatican I says about Rome.
Roger. Okay.
And I have a whole lecture on all of Basil's letters, by the way.
On your YouTube?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'll look for those. Well, so I just want to say this then. I understand that you see a contradiction because certain people had a council, they discovered a truth, Rome didn't recognize it during the lifetime of
No, it's not just certain people. It's what the East called an ecumenical council, and they didn't care if Rome accepted it or not. And then Rome retroactively accepted it.
So I guess, again, I'll just ask what is
it's the Cappadocians, the very people that you appealed to a minute ago. It's not just anybody. It's Basil, right. Cappadocians, and particularly Gregory of Nyssa, who was you realize that after Constantinople I, the emperor said that if you don't agree with Nyssa's theology, you're wrong, particularly on the Trinity.
You're right. I understand that. But if we get back to my original question, was, how does the Orthodox understand, what is the common golden thread throughout ecumenical councils that give them the same normative authority? How do we what's the criteria which they're all commonly judged by?
Yeah, there's not a single thing like Western people think of and want to identify, quote, ecumenical councils. And that's my point that I brought up earlier, that you don't have that in Rome either. So this is really a bugaboo that Roman Catholics like to pull out, which they don't even have. That's my point. So, but we can give you the criteria, what we think identifies authoritative councils.
Okay, but yeah, so what is the process then? Because I would say to you, it would ultimately be Rome. Rome would be the ultimate arbiter.
Yeah, so yeah, just asserting contrary to all the stuff that I say, you just assert the position again. And I already gave you examples to where just saying Rome, it doesn't even work.
No. Okay.
Okay, so why is it Lateran 649 an ecumenical council?
I would have to look into that one specifically. I'm not equipped to answer that particular.
So as per Vatican I's definitions, it meets all the criteria to be an ecumenical council, and yet it's not. And do you understand that Roman Catholics themselves have numbered the ecumenical councils differently in history?
Well, I know the Orthodox also have disagreement on how particular councils.
Yeah, so this exactly.
That's
yeah.
why I'm curious.
So this is why this argument doesn't get us anywhere. It's a bugaboo.
Well, but the reason it does is because in the Catholic Church we do have one head. We do have one decider, the magisterium.
Yeah, but you're confused. Yeah, but it doesn't actually do the work. That's my point. So is Vatican II an authoritative council or not?
Oh, I'm not in the magisterium, so I can't speak on that one.
Also, well, wait a minute. I thought the purpose of the magisterium is to make the laity know the true faith, and so you don't know?
No, I don't know about that one, Jay. I don't know about that one.
So the magisterium doesn't do the work to actually identify for you what's the true faith and what's not.
Well, I would say Vatican II clearly. I mean, I don't know if I want to get into the debate, the weeds of a Vatican II debate.
Why not? I mean, if the principle is that the papacy gives epistemic certitude, then that's precisely where we should go, because that's the most controversial thing in the Roman Catholic world in the last 100 years. So we've had 70 years of the papacy teaching Vatican II. So obviously it's authoritative from the papacy's perspective. So, do you believe in? So do you believe in religious liberty? Do you believe that Muslims worship God like you do?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay, so you don't follow the magisterial teachings of Rome.
I don't know what it would be in Vatican II. I specifically don't follow. But what I would say...
Now, Nostra Aetate says that Muslims and Jews worship the same God as the Christians. Muslims and Hindus approach God in love and faith and love.
Yeah, and love is love, as we all know. So, yes, I understand. I understand where you're getting at, and I know you're not amiss to the traditional Catholic position or anything like that.
I was a trad for many years. I know all about it. I lived that world.
Right.
I went to Latin Mass for 8 years.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. I currently attend very traditional Anglo-Ordinarian church. And so, yeah, that's awesome. I don't, I could relitigate this with you, but I think it'd be familiar territory. Again, I'm just curious with these councils from the Orthodox position, what is the way to determine, like, what is that single soul criteria?
There's not a single soul criteria. That's my whole point. That's what I just said. There's nothing about this idea that there's a magical thing that tells you what the ecumenical councils are. It doesn't exist.
It wouldn't be like a magic. It wouldn't be a magic.
No, but it's treated that. What I'm saying is it's treated that way in the Roman Catholic position because you think that just saying the papacy tells you that. And I just asked you about the most controversial council in the last 100 years, and you say I can't tell you. So it doesn't even do the work for you.
Well, I'm sure you've heard this in traditional Catholic circles, but when you take a perspective on councils and theology and stuff, and I know this isn't a miss to Orthodox as well, we don't look at this. We don't look at the span of decades. We look at the span of centuries, if not millennia, right?
Okay, well, I mean, so Vatican II is almost a century old. It's like 70 years ongoing.
Correct, and there's nefarious actors behind it.
So we only know Vatican. We'll only know Vatican. Well, hold on. It won't matter how many centuries go by, though, because it's already confirmed by the papacy, and according to Vatican I, whatever's confirmed by the papacy is dogma.
Right. Okay, but was Vatican II declared infallible?
Absolutely.
Did it make any anathemas? I mean,
well, there's nothing. There's nothing that says that something has to have an anathema attached to it to be infallible. In fact, I've listed 4 papal statements about Vatican II being infallible, which I have a whole list. Would you like that list?
Sure, but those are all going to be post-Vatican II, correct?
What is that? I mean, the principle in your church that you just identified is the papacy. So it doesn't matter when he says it, pre or post-Vatican II.
No, it totally matters.
No, it doesn't.
Well, during the Arian controversy,
you just argued that You just argued that the papacy. Whoa! Just 1 second. You argued that the papacy retroactively, 200 years later, could affirm Constantinople I, and you said that was okay. But if Francis and company retroact or post Vatican II say Vatican II is dogmatic, now you don't have to listen to it.
No, I mean, I see on the face how that seems like a contradiction, but let me explain myself. Let me explain myself. So the Pope at the time of Athanasius of Alexandria during the Arian controversy, he excommunicated him.
Right.
We came to learn later that, and I'm not saying this is exactly what's happening now, but I'm saying that there are nuances behind the scenes that maybe we're not privy to as the people who are living immediately in those events.
But this won't matter. This won't matter because what does Vatican I say about what the Pope confirms for all of the church and for all times? Now, I could see, maybe you could say, I see where you're going. You're saying, well, maybe like Vigilius, there was a compelling that the Pope didn't have, free exercise of his will, right? Maybe the Pope was under duress from, I don't know, let's say the CIA went in and said, hey, you're going to confirm Vatican II because we want it. All right.
Correct.
So theoretically, right. So yeah, I could say,
correct.
I could see maybe you could have some argument that John XXIII or Paul VI did this out of duress. However, the problem is that you can't have 70 years of duress because Vatican I says that the See of Peter will never cease to have an authoritative magisterial successor unto the end of the world. And so that constituent element of the papacy upholding not just dogma, but also the unity and also the preservation can never go away. If it does, then it loses one of its constituent elements. And if you haven't read, the 15 or so pages of Vatican I highly recommend reading it.
Yeah, I definitely need to reread it. That's for sure. It's been a while. But I mean, right. So just to finish my point. I think you already understood. Under duress, he released it later. St. Athanasius never blamed him for it. Yes, it's been 70 years. Is there duress on the Vatican now? Absolutely, and I know you wouldn't disagree with that either. What will we know about these events in 100, 200 years? Who's to say? I know Vatican.
Okay, so hold on. So let's say that theoretically, in your model, there was duress for the last 70 years of the papacy, and therefore we can retroactively cancel all that out. Why does that not open up the possibility of every ecumenical council and papal teaching being subject to duress, and therefore Pius IX of Vatican I was also under duress, and therefore all of it is placed into doubt?
Well, that's almost an impossible question to answer, right? Because then we're getting into the specifics of everything.
Well, but we're at the point now where you're arguing that we will never know what the true teaching of Vatican II was until 200-300 years into the future. So really, now we're at the point where magisterium isn't doing us any good at all.
Do you think that in the Orthodox world, and this is a response to what you just said, do you think in the Orthodox world, your respective bishops still have questions that need to be answered for the faithful? Are there still important disagreements within Orthodoxy?
Sure, but I don't place the epistemic principle being a guy in Rome.
Well, that's exactly my question. Where is that principle?
Right. So the normative authority question is different from the epistemic question. That's what you seem to be confusing, right? So we both agree that there is a body of people within history. For us, it's the local Orthodox bishop or Orthodox synods. You understand the church is normally governed by local synods, right? It's not. That's why for 300 years there is no ecumenical council. At the time of 300, we don't know what Nicaea will teach because Nicaea hasn't happened yet, and yet we still know the faith. We still know what the doctrines and dogmas are because it's not hinging on what's going on in Rome. But listen,
there still was an appellate structure.
Okay, but so what? The Alexandria document. Alexandria document admits that the appellate structure of the Sardican, canons or whatever is not Vatican I. So what you got to demonstrate is that Vatican I is taught in the first 1,000 years, and that's what no Roman Catholic can do because even the Vatican now admits that the Vatican I view is not taught in the first 1,000 years. Have you read the Alexandria document?
No, I have not.
Okay, so now Rome is admitting about 90% of our arguments a la the Alexandria document. So what does that mean?
Sounds like he's bounding.
Okay, so now it's Francis, and I can hand wave it because I don't care what Francis says. Yeah, but see, that's the thing is that if you look at Vatican I, like you don't have the ability as a Catholic layperson to hand wave Francis.
No, I don't. But an immediate pope could. I mean, Pope Honorius, he was condemned heretic. Mm-hmm. At a council by his immediate successor, and all the other bishops replied.
Yeah, and did that? Yeah, and did that?
Peter,
Yeah, but
Peter
you
has spoken, so that didn't seem to.
No,
be
you missed everything again. That's why Lateran 649 is so important because the council didn't just restate Lateran 649, which had already condemned monothelitism. Which, if they were papal, that's what they would have done. Rather, they investigate the writings and condemn the pope. So it's not a papal council like you guys want to make it by the mere fact that they didn't just cite Lateran 649. I mean, if Vatican I was true, then the Sixth Ecumenical Council wasn't necessary.
I feel like what you're saying is, like if we just brought this down to like a very simple judicial system, right?
Right. So in other words, let's ignore all the arguments and let's just bring it down to something simple. But that's a false analogy because you can't make. Well,
can you just hear me? Your breadth of knowledge and logic and all that is far greater than mine. Obviously, if anything, just help me catch up to you.
Okay.
And tell me what you think about this simple analogy. In a basic, let's say two people go to court, they hash out something about, for in America, they hash out about something about the Constitution, and that court rules in favor of the defendant. It gets appealed. It goes to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court confirms what that lower court's position was. We would understand that as, that's exactly how an appellate structure works. Did they discover the truth in that original court hearing at the lower local level?
Do you think that this analogy doesn't work because, as is already admitted in Roman Catholic theologians, the appellate court structure of the canons of Sardica is not Vatican I. So if you're trying to make an analogy, the actual history of the church and the canons of Sardica don't work.
Right. Yeah. I guess I can't really answer that.
So canons of Sardica, if you read there's a good book that discusses this in a whole chapter by Edward Denny. It's called Papalism by Denny. And there's a great chapter on Sardica in there. Ubi also has debates where Sardica comes up. Sardica calls for another local synod. Oops, that's not papalism, because if it was papalism, the appellate structure would not call for another council. It would call for the decision of the Bishop of Rome.
I don't know how that necessarily follows, though. I mean, why does it have to
Why
be
would we
the
have
council?
another council if the whole point is that the Bishop of Rome can solve it?
Well, the Bishop of Rome isn't some sort of oracle, but if push comes
Okay,
to
well then
shove,
Vatican I is
that-
not true, because Vatican I says the Bishop of Rome is an oracle who'd solve. You're arguing that he solves the problems. That's the whole point. What do you mean?
Okay, all right. Well, hey, you got me on that. You got me on that word. Good one.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you get what I mean. Regardless of agreement.
Yeah, I just think that the appellate structure analogy has already happened, and it's the canons of Sardica in the early church, and the canons of Sardica, again, I think they're even discussed in the Alexandria document, if I remember. Let me see. I think it even points out that it doesn't actually do anything to prove the Vatican I view.
So
May not be.
I know you've handled this one many a time, but refresh me if you would. What do you make about obviously the dispute between Kirill and Bartholomew, because they're both trying to appeal to a universal authority by trying to decide their own diocesan limits outside of the mutually agreed diocesan limits?
Yeah, I mean, we've had these kinds of problems in the first 1,000 years of the church, where patriarchates were in schism and disagreeing with one another. So, how does that? Well, what does that have to do with proving whether the papacy is true or not?
Well, it would have to do with it, because how can either of them claim a universality in their decisions if none of them had a universal claim to begin
Well,
with?
the whole functioning of Orthodox canon law and synods is different than the way that things function in the Roman Catholic world, right? So, I mean, there's a whole process, for example, as to how this goes about. So, for example, in our canon law, there's stages of canonical discipline. The first stage is removal of communion. So we're still at the stage where there's no longer communion between Kirill and Bartholomew. And then the next stages that follow would be like excommunication. And so, yeah, it's true that you could have a lot of people who, let's say the Orthodox Church gets split down the middle. You could have a lot of people who say, well, I'm going to side with, the EP or whatever. And then, yeah, definitely it would probably be a situation where time eventually tells who's the true faith and who's the false faith. But if you go to the first 1,000 years of Christianity, you'll find many examples of where we had schisms like this. And in many of those cases, as referenced by the Meletian schism and what I talked about with Basil, Rome didn't do anything to solve that problem. In fact, Basil complains that Rome is part of the problem.
Right. Yeah, and I would need to read the context.
Well, it's just
specifically
again,
see
it's
what
only
he's
like
talking about.
it's only like 4 or 5 pages of letters. Like I said, 66 to 70, I think.
I'll definitely read it for sure. And that was the letter to Alexandria by Basil.
The first of the series of letters on this issue is letter. Excuse me, I think it's 71. I might have missed. It's his letter to Athanasius. You know who Athanasius is, I'm sure.
Letter to Athanasius.
68. 60.
Oh, was this during the Arian controversy?
No, it's post the year 371. It's letters. Hold on. It's letter 66.
Is this Athanasius of Alexandria he's writing to?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
So letter 66, 67, 68, 69, and 70. It's not that long. It's about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 pages printed out. And he talks about, by the way, you'll notice that he calls Antioch the head church there, which Antioch is not the head. It's just flowery terminology that the church fathers use all the time. He says, I've asked for help from Rome, from the West. They've done nothing. He says that Antioch is the head of the whole body. Again, could we take that out of the context and make it say that the Bishop of Antioch is the head of the whole church? He says that when I've asked Rome to correct the unruly, they've failed. They've failed in the Orthodox faith. They're worthless. They've given no help. Rome has failed to condemn heresies. Rome is ignorant. On and on and on. All he does is talk about how much of a failure Rome is. And, yeah, where's Vatican I in any of that?
Right. I mean, I would echo those sentiments as well currently. So I
Okay, but you don't have the liberty of that if Vatican I is part of your dogma. You don't have that liberty. Okay, so if you want to agree with St. Basil, then you're on our side, because that's not a Vatican I attitude. That's a vatitude. That's a vatitude. That's not a vatitude. Right, so let's go to Decrees of Vatican I, and we read that, and we find out what you actually have to believe in regard to papal supremacy. So you don't have the liberty of doing that. You can't be Orthodox and Roman Catholic at the same time.
Are there like a few key lines with Vatican I that you find as most problematic that you could cite right now, or does it
just go to papalencyclicals.net and print out the 10 or 15 pages, and you'll see that you don't have the liberty of disagreeing with the papal ordinary magisterial teaching. And in fact, even when it's not magisterial ordinary teaching, even when it's just ordinary, you have to submit with docility to it, even if you disagree. So how do you submit to docility if you go to the SSPX?
Right. Well, yeah, and SSPX, that's canonically irregular. I don't presently go there.
Okay. So then you do submit with docility. Then you do submit. You recognize Francis, and you do submit with docility to his ordinary fallible teaching.
Correct. Yes.
Well, it didn't sound like in this discussion you were submitting to his ordinary fallible teaching. It sounded like you dismissed a lot of it.
I'm not happy. Yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with many
Okay,
things.
so then now you do accept Vatican II.
I mean, I'm not really in the position to accept or not accept.
Well, if you accept Francis, if you accept Francis, you have to accept his teachings with docility. So you do have to accept it. So you can't play agnostic on Vatican II.
Well, wait, hold on. I have to accept what's infallibly defined by Francis. And
yeah, and ecumenical councils are. Remember, this whole discussion was ecumenical councils. So that's an ecumenical. Any Novus Ordo church that I go to where Francis is recognized tells me I have to believe in Vatican II.
For sure, yeah, and I would certainly say that there's confusion in the church, 100%.
All right, well, look, hey, go ahead. Look, we're going to move on. We got some other people. I'm not trying to be rude to you, but do you have any last, I'll give you the last comments or statements, anything you want to leave us with?
Well, I will tell you that, I very much appreciate your work, and, you've helped lead me to Apostolic Christianity. I started listening to you when I was a Protestant, and I did explore Orthodoxy. I was going to an Orthodox church for a good 8 months, but as it currently stands, I'm more persuaded by the Catholic position, but I will be familiarizing myself with Vatican I, and I hope to come on again and chat about it. I guess if I could just throw one last question, and you don't have to give me another comment.
That's fine. Go ahead. Sure.
So something that I find persuasive as a providential argument, and I just want to understand your take on it, is I understand that, from the Catholic position, we see Florence as you had the highest, you had the Emperor of Byzantium, you had the Pope, you had all the representatives of the Pentarchy sign. Yes, did you have...
No, St. Mark of Ephesus didn't sign it.
Did he represent a patriarch, or was he just a bishop?
Well, there's nothing about patriarchs that makes them magically like, oh, well, it's infallible when all the patriarchates accept it. I listed various criteria which help us to identify the councils that we accept. But in theory, because the patriarchate system arises post-Nicaea, it's theoretically possible for all the patriarchates in Orthodoxy to become heretical.
Right. I find that problematic because that
Why?
That's the Protestant view, right? That's why.
Only if you're a Roman Catholic would you think that's problematic, because you're attributing to the Orthodoxy Roman Catholic presuppositions. So no, there's no 5-headed infallible monster that runs the Orthodox Church. They just represent big C's.
Infallible Hydra.
Look, so a patriarchate represents a big C, that's it, a big jurisdiction. And the only thing that patriarchates have that regular bishops don't have is privileges within their canonical jurisdictions. And for example, in the councils, Rome might be considered first. And you'll notice that Rome is considered first, and then the other patriarchates are movable, right? So it's movable in the history of the first 1,000 years of Christianity, because eventually, even though it's controversial, at Constantinople I, Constantinople is considered to be second. And that move is challenged by Pope Leo, not on the basis of anything to do with papism, but Pope Leo says it's not fair to Alexandria, a la the canons of Nicaea, because Nicaea put Alexandria second. But eventually, the Bishop of Constantinople is accepted as second to Rome. So you understand that these positions are movable canonical positions. And I don't have the view, I've never seen any argument as to how, is it possible for all the patriarchates to become heretical? Well, if we didn't have the patriarchates in the year 300, all 5 of them, I don't understand why it would be essential to the Orthodox Church that we have, quote, 5 patriarchates. It's just a canonical development that is fine and good and helpful for certain times. But even the Patriarch of Constantinople, for example, he only has underneath him nowadays a few thousand people, right? In his actual local jurisdiction, it's minuscule compared to hundreds of millions of people, a la Russian Orthodox Church or something like that. So it's a lot of the patriarchate stuff in the Orthodox Church. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that canonical stuff, synodal stuff, that's what it's about. It's not it's not like 5 little popes versus 1 big pope.
Right, yeah. I understand what you're saying. Just to finish the whole picture, and challenge any of my presuppositions within this as you may. As the Catholics see Florence, we see the emperor, we see these higher bishops, and I understand what you just said. Just to finish the point, signing on. And
you understand the rest of the Orthodox world rejected it, though.
Yes,
So, and also, let me give you one example. There's something you're missing. Hold on, before you go on, you can say whatever you want, but before you go on, there's an important mistake you're making, which is you took issue with, for example, laity having anything to do with this in terms of reception. So when I said the rest of the Orthodox world, I meant the rest of the Orthodox world's bishops and laity. So in the Orthodox Church, there's a big difference between us and you, which is that laity have a very important role in also receiving and accepting doctrines and dogmas from synods, councils, or bishops or patriarchs. And this is very different because you think, well, that doesn't make any sense because, what laity don't know anything. They shouldn't. No, they have an absolutely important role. And we need to only look to the examples that you also have to accept in your own church of the 7th Ecumenical Council and the icons. So you may not be aware of this, but in the 7th Ecumenical Council, there were many patriarchs. Well, there were several patriarchs and bishops who believed in iconoclasm, and there were other handfuls that did not believe in iconoclasm. They were iconodules. So the locus of the church's defense of iconodualism was not from the patriarchates. It was not even necessarily from the Bishop of Rome, although initially he did sign off correctly on the right position just of images itself. In fact, it was the laity and the monastics that saved the day in the iconoclasm controversy. So there's actually key examples of where corrupt bishops in iconoclasm, same as in Arianism too, by the way, where corrupt bishops tried to force the church to accept iconoclasm, and it was the laity that played a very key role with the monastics in rejecting that. So that's an example that's applicable to your church, because that's first 1,000 years. You think that's Roman Catholic, then you have the same thing going on in the iconoclasm controversy that you're faulting me for pointing out in Florence.
Right. Okay, so thank you for that. Really, I do appreciate that. And I'm taking all that to heart. So again, just to finish the point, so what we're taking issue with, like you see in many ecumenical councils, you always have dissenting bishops. And other clergy, you always have a small remnant. And this is me quoting, I believe his name, Bishop Timothy Ware. He himself said Florence seemingly has all the marks of an ecumenical council. And you had...
Cool. Can I quote James Martin too, or will you? What do you think? So what? Do you accept James Martin?
No, I don't accept James Martin. But
Okay, so a bad argument in Timothy Ware, what does that mean?
Well, it's just a bishop, so that whatever that means to anybody. I don't know what it means to the Orthodox position. That's what I'm still confused on.
Oh, come on. You know that because a bishop says something bad. That's not a good argument against. I can find 1,000 Roman Catholic bishops saying ridiculous things every day. So what is that? That doesn't do anything. Do you know what a tu quoque is? Do you know what a tu quoque is?
Tu quoque, like rules for thee, not for me.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I hear what you're saying. I don't want to get into the weeds of another little argument. I just want to try to get all this out. So the providential argument I'm coming to is what you end up happening is, yes, you had a small minority dissenting from Florence, which we would find, arbitrary. And I know you wouldn't.
Again, you're misunderstanding. So you understand that
I'm so close.
It's not a minority. It's just that's false. You understand that the rest of the Orthodox world is the majority, and they rejected this. So it's a minority that's at Florence. Okay. So you're totally wrong.
Sure. Okay, sure. Majority in the wider Orthodox world. Minority as far as the Orthodox representatives.
That's true. That's correct.
Okay. Yes, we're in agreement. We're in a total agreement there. Okay. And you had Okay. So, anyways. And they were, I think, in a official union for, a generation, 50, 70 years or something like that, before the Muslims came in, killed.
Correct, right. So Byzantium fell when it was uniate, correct.
Yes, it fell. So, it fell during then, when the people, right, you would see that as a punishment for being uniate.
Well, I mean, I don't make dumb providential arguments because they're stupid. They don't prove anything.
Well, come on now. Providence is totally biblical.
No, but providence is biblical, but reading into providence, punishments and judgments. Have you read City of God? You understand Augustine makes fun of this whole idea because the Roman pagans were arguing that Rome fell because they accepted Christianity. And Augustine says that this is a dumb argument. So I'm just simply saying that I agree with Augustine. This is a dumb argument.
Well, hey, Augustine also is pro filioque, so...
What does that have to do with the point that I just made about his argument against providential, quote-unquote, arguments that Rome fell because of Christianity? You understand that it can be interpreted in any different way, right? I mean, you could argue that, why can't I argue then that it fell because it was uniate? You see how arbitrary this is? It's silly. I mean, Pius IX was imprisoned he was imprisoned in the Vatican, Therefore, that was a punishment providentially, and Vatican I is false. You see how silly these arguments are?
That's Napoleon, right? When Bonaparte put him hostage?
Well, the Masons took over in Italy, and the Pope was imprisoned in the Vatican. So is that a punishment that disproves Roman Catholicism at Vatican I? You see how arbitrary these interpretations of history can be?
I think the differences of scale would
dude, you understand how philosophically absurd that is. So now it's arbitrarily a quote scale. Where do you get the scale from?
I think
it's just arbitrary.
Hold on. Where do I get the scale from? You had the majority of the laity and the lower clergy reject Florence, and they rejected the council. And what you had happen was every single patriarchate fell under domination of Muslim rule.
So why can't I argue that Florence fell because it was uniate?
Apostolic originating.
So this is all arbitrary.
Here's why, Jay. Here's why, Jay. Because the Orthodox world has continued to be Orthodox, not uniate, and they still are under this burden.
Yeah, but and Pope Benedict says that he says that the Orthodox have maintained the faith for the last 1,000 years.
Okay, which is totally kosher as far as Catholic theology, because
no, that means that we don't need the. That means that being under the papacy doesn't prove. That means that being under the papacy doesn't give us the knowledge of the true faith, and it also means that being under Muslims doesn't mean that we lose the true faith.
No. Because a schismatic is different from a heretic, and I know you understand this. A schismatic is someone who can be orthodox in all their teaching, But a schismatic is someone that doesn't.
That doesn't. No, and by the way, that's a mistake, because in the teachings of Leo the 13th and Pius the 12th, and in your own canon law, a schismatic is outside the body of Christ. So it doesn't matter whether I know there's a difference between a schismatic and a heretic, but both are equally outside the church. So that doesn't apply.
That doesn't. I mean, that's still. I don't.
No, it
I
doesn't.
don't know how that would.
Because a schismatic and a heretic are equally outside of the church. So the argument doesn't hold.
Well, I understand that, but you can still be orthodox in your teaching as a schismatic, because the thing that makes someone a schismatic as opposed to simply a heretic is the fact that they are orthodox in their theology, but they reject the authority structure that we see as Christ establishing with the Catholic Church.
Right, and then so what Benedict says is that the Orthodox have maintained the faith, and therefore the faith doesn't need the papacy to be maintained.
Okay, right, but they're still.
So none of this proves Catholicism is the point. These are bad arguments is the point.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I got the full point out there.
But why? Okay, but hold on. But if we're going to use these providential arguments, do you not understand that it's arbitrary if when I point out that Byzantium fell when it was uniate?
Well, I don't think that's. What I would, again, respond to you with is if it had to do with it being uniate, then why are those places that fell way back when on the, and I forgot to mention this piece, and I know this will probably bug you, but on the day of Pentecost, on the feast day of the Holy Spirit, after a council that was deciding the filioque, among other things, these places have continued to be under Muslim rule, even though their rulers are, as you would say, Orthodox and not uniate. So obviously, if this was
okay, so by this argument, all of the Western European nations, which are now falling to Muslim dominance, that also now disproves the papacy, because when I go to Europe, it's Muslims everywhere. So now, you see how silly these arguments? These are terrible arguments. I mean, have you been to Europe? Have you been to Europe?
Yes.
When?
I've seen the kebab shops in Berlin. I know what you're talking about.
No, I'm talking. You're right, and it's everywhere, right? It's not just right. So there's gigantic hordes of Muslims in Italy too. I was just in Italy 3 months ago. Okay, so so there we go. So there we go. God has punished and cursed the Roman Catholic Church because the Muslims are winning now. See how bad these arguments are?
I would say if that's where the nuance ended, for sure, I would see how that's a bad.
Well, if we got to go into nuance,
we can't really get into open immigration on this platform, though. I wouldn't want to.
Well, you said scale, and so what's the scale of the rise of Islam in Europe versus Catholicism? So now scale doesn't apply?
I mean, well, the scale you're talking about is on an incredibly small time frame.
Oh, so now it's scale of time, not scale of numbers.
Yes, correct. I mean, the more time, the more witnesses you have attesting to a particular reality, the more weight and gravity it's given.
So it just gets more and more qualified and more arbitrary, right? Because when you're trying to flesh out why we should believe that this is the proper way to interpret the providential punishment, you understand that the more I drilled into it, it got more and more nuanced, qualified, and arbitrary. And so now it's just, it's only the scale within this time frame of the quantity of this many converts within. And so it's just arbitrary. How is this argument not arbitrary?
I don't know what the fundamental issue is with nuance. I mean, nuance is how you.
I don't have a problem with the word nuance. It's the nuance of it becoming now a small time frame and certain numbers.
Right. I mean, what I'm saying to you is I find those things persuasive.
Yeah, but I mean, people find bad arguments persuasive all the time. So, yeah, that's possible. That's just a joke. It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke.
I know. You can't hurt my feelings, Jay. Don't worry. I'm too much of a super fan, so never happened over here. But, well, yeah, man. Hey, listen, I just think this was a great conversation.
It was a great conversation. I appreciate you keeping it very civil and cool. You get a grade A on your demeanor. It was a lot of fun. By the way, is that Bono? I see the profile image. Is that Bono? It looks like Bono.
No, that's just me, man. That's me.
Okay.
Just found some rose-colored shades. 5 years ago, put them on.
Okay.
That's the story. Nothing much to it.
Well, thanks, Kevin. You're welcome to come on anytime, bring any more questions, objections that you have. I would say specifically on Florence, there's a good book by Ostromov, Ostrumov. That's a really good book to read.